All right, so we're gonna cover Rule 13 today, and then after that, we're gonna go do some practice test questions from the USGA's test. Let's see. There we go. Okay, perfect. So Rule 13. So to start with, basically this is going to cover things that we need to do or that we can't do to improve ROI, and we're going to cover both areas through the green as well as in a hazard. So the base of this Rule 13 ball played as it lies is this first part here. Okay, so 13.2. So this is an area that does come up quite a bit. I think does involve some form of judgment, but there is it's a list of things that you can do, and they do provide some good examples in the rule here. So a player must not improve or allowed to be improved the position or lie of his ball, the area of his intended swing or stance, his line of play on a reasonable extension of that line beyond the hole, the area in which he is to drop or place a ball. And we've got this decision here that talks about what it really means to improve. So you want to turn to your books there. It's on page 175, and it covers what it means to improve. So just reading through it here, it says in the context of Rule 13-2, improve means to change for the better so that the player creates a potential advantage. With respect to the position of or lie of his ball, the area of his intended stance or swing, his line of play, or a reasonable extension of that line beyond the hole. Whatever. Therefore, merely changing an area protected by Rule 13 will not be a breach of Rule 13-2 unless it creates such a potential advantage for the player in his play. So in the whole paragraph, really what I highlighted is to improve means to change for the better so the player creates a potential advantage. And then again, we're at the end create such a potential advantage for the player in his play. So it really comes down to is the player gaining an advantage when they're doing these things. So if they're holding back a tree limb to allow them to have a full swing, that's something that is improving their area of intended swing. Whereas if they're doing something 5 feet away and they're hacking away in heather, is that really improving their shot? Most people would say no, right? And so that's why when we have situations like that where a player is in a situation whether they're under a tree or in a tall grassy area, most players that know the rules won't take any practice swings around their ball so that they don't cause anything to get interfered or altered. And if they go 5 feet away or whatever you want to say, where they're not creating an advantage, it basically absolves them from this two-stroke penalty.
I have a question about this, his line of play or a reasonable extension of that line beyond the hole. So that would be before he gets on the green. Because once it becomes a line of putt, the line of putt doesn't extend beyond the hole, right?
Correct. So yeah, so that would be something where maybe a player would, and maybe they're hitting out of the bunker or something on the green, and then there's I can't think of a great example, but maybe there's somewhere just off the green where they're going to there's some divots or something like that they're going to fix because they may end up in that area. That would be something that would that wouldn't be allowed.
So Pat, if you look at 13.2, there is wording in the third bullet or the third bullet on 13.2. It allows for an extension beyond the hole for improving line of play.
That's what I just read.
Okay, so
but it's line of play, not line of putt. So that's what I said was when it becomes line of putt, your line of putt does not extend beyond the hole.
Right, but you can't improve your line of play beyond the hole as well.
Right. And I think a lot of, I mean, most of the stuff that you would fix beyond your, you know, if you were on the green would be things that you could repair, ball marks, old hole plugs, things like that. Loose impediments, sand, you know, you can move those. Whereas if you're not on the green, that's different.
Kyle?
Yeah.
If there's a divot, you're off the green, there's a divot just short of the green. Are you allowed to repair that or?
It would just depend. It would just depend. Well, if it's just a loose impediment, if it didn't affect your play, you could pick it up. But if it was in your line of play, you can't move that out of the way.
I mean, some of these divots are pretty good size.
Right. Well, I mean.
And if you're going to chip, you got to
Well,
go
sorry.
You're saying a divot, you're saying a divot?
A divot like pelt, right? Just a loose piece of yeah, you can move that, right? It's just a loose impediment.
You can't repair a divot
Can't
though
replace it.
off
Yeah,
on the
You
fringe.
couldn't,
Pitch mark.
you couldn't grab that divot and put it back in the hole.
Either one.
You could grab it and throw it off to the side, but you couldn't actually put it back in its place if it was in your line. Does that make sense? So if it's just
It says
loose
right,
and
it
it's
says
there-
right in the decision, examples of changes that are likely to create such a potential advantage, and the things you can't do. The first one is can't repair a pitch mark through the green or replace divot hole 5 yards in front of your ball.
But
That says unlikely to create
Yeah,
such
yeah,
a
exactly.
potential
You could-
advantage.
You could grab that pelt if
This
it's
is
loose
likely.
and throw it out of the way.
Oh, example
Yeah.
changes are likely.
Yeah. I mean, just the same with any loose impediment that that you could move. So if it was a leaf, you could do the same thing. All right. So the player must not improve or allowed to be improved by any of the following actions. So pressing a club on the ground. So you'll see this. Well, obviously in a bunker, we know we can't do that, but maybe in a sandy area, not in a bunker, or a player may put the club down and have a line to kind of show or to give them a spot to hit it. That's not allowed. It also basically kind of tees up the ball if they're able to groove their club behind it there. Moving, bending, or breaking anything growing or fixed, including immovable obstructions and objects defining out of bounds. So this would be that situation where the player is, near a tree and they're wrapping their arm or their leg around a bush to keep it out of the way. That would be something that they're not allowed to do. Additionally, immovable obstructions and objects defining out of bounds. So it could be an out of bounds stake. You can't remove that. But however, you can remove a hazard stake or I guess if you had ground under repair stakes, you can move those as well. But the OB stakes you can't move. And then other immovable obstructions. So I mean that would that could be a lot of different things, but those are some things that you wouldn't be allowed to move or bend or break. So if the fence was in your way and you broke a hole in the fence so you could have a full swing, that wouldn't be allowed. Maybe that's an example. And then creating or eliminating irregularities of surface. So a good example of this is a ball that hits near the green and hits just off the green in the fringe and spins back, and that pitch mark is in that player's way. They're not allowed to fix that. They have to play over it. So a lot of times you'll see a player try to fit it down, and even too when someone's taking embedded ball relief, you'll see this a lot. They'll they get it, they try to drop it back in the hole, which is what they're supposed to do, and then the ball will move this far away or a couple inches away from where their pitch mark is, and then they'll immediately tap it down. Well, if that was in their way, if it affected their play, that's a penalty. And then by as Lee was saying earlier, by removing or pressing down sand, loose soil, replace divots, or other cut turf placed in position. And then you can't remove dew, frost, or water.
All right, let's go over the practice swings again.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
still confused on how critical you want to be. You see it in a lot of the juniors. taking practice swings before it's their turn to hit.
Right.
And whammo, they got 3 pelts laying out there.
Mhm.
Now, granted, they're right next to the ball most of the time, but theoretically, if they were ahead of the ball, they can't replace them. If they were behind the ball and it didn't affect their play, theoretically, they can go and replace them. Is that right?
Sure.
I mean, how
Sure.
you see it all the time, though. The kids go up and then they grab a divot and put it back because
Right.
they're taught to care for the course
Right.
before they take their stroke.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is just going to be a judgment call, and whether you think that is getting in the way. I mean, the one thing that I would probably look into to see is if it's a full shot,
Right.
probably chances are them going and picking up that divot and bringing it back is not going to affect it. But if it's a chip shot, they chunk a wedge and they're taking practice and they go and they fix that divot, pull it out of the way. That might be something that's actually in their line of play, so to speak.
Isn't there some wording about influencing the shot?
Right. Yeah.
So, and why would they be replacing the divot before they hit the ball?
Well, pace of play. I mean,
Well, how is that?
well, they're nothing to do, so they're sitting there
I
swinging.
mean, they're waiting.
Yeah, they're
to hit
waiting
and
for
then-
somebody in the woods, and they're whacking away.
I think
See
you
it.
could argue that they're replacing because they don't want to look down at those divots, and those
Right.
divots are influencing their shot.
Right.
I would say you couldn't replace them. Be my interpretation of, assuming that's in here. I don't know that it is. I thought there was some wording about influencing their.
Yeah. I mean, it's
I just see it a lot. I don't
Yeah,
know.
right.
yeah.
I think it's like you said, like where the examples in the 0.5, if they repair or replace something and it's a 150-yard shot,
Right.
that's not going to affect something right in front of them. But if they're pitching or chipping to the green, then that's kind of the example.
Well,
He's going.
I thought in
visualization.
Mike's example, I'm sitting there waiting for a shot. I take 2 divots right next to the ball.
Mhm.
Now I don't want to look at those divots.
Yeah. I think.
Then I would say I don't want to look at them because I don't want to think about hitting them fat or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
I would say
Yeah.
if that wording is in there, it can influence. That's what
Yeah. Oh,
Question.
I think.
You gotta ask the guy, why are you doing
Yeah.
that?
Exactly. That's
I'm just taking care of the
Right.
course.
right.
I don't like looking at him.
Yeah.
But same token,
Good
you're 2
answers.
feet away and you hit a divot, and it's in your line of stance now before you hit the ball.
It really all comes down to is it going to affect that next shot that they're going to hit? And if they haven't hit it yet, it's that shot that they're looking at. And in your case, Lee, if their intent is to do it because they don't want to look at it, or that they feel like putting that back in is going to help them hit the shot, then yeah, I think you would give the player a penalty there. But if as Jim was saying, if you ask them a question and they say, I was just doing it to for care of the course, then play on, unless we felt that, hey, this was actually a penalty. I mean, someone might tap down a pitch mark in front of their ball and say, I was just doing it for care of the course. But even if they did that for that reason, if it actually influenced their next shot, they would still be subject to penalty.
Well, and your actions might be different. In Mike's discussion in the junior tournament, you might take a little different
Right.
approach than the Michigan Amateurs.
Sure, exactly, and I think that there's lots of things that go into that. And, you might have someone that's hacking away in the heather at a junior event that's on shot 10, and there might be something where you just tell them after they're done, hey, by the way, don't do that going forward. Whereas if it's the last group of the junior championship, that's a different story. So I think there's always context. I mean, obviously we want to enforce the rules, but there's a time and a place, especially when it comes to juniors, that is that the right place to say someone that's on their 10th stroke, oh, by the way, add 2, right? So hopefully Nick isn't listening. I don't think he'd like that, but
No, he wouldn't like that.
He's everywhere.
but
I had
yeah.
to add 2 for a 13 one time.
All right, so examples of changes that are unlikely to create such a potential advantage for a player. So here's a good list of examples. We talked about a few of these. Repairs a small pitch mark, smooths a footprint in a bunker, or replaces a divot in the divot hole on his line of play 5 yards in front of his ball prior to making a 150-yard approach shot through the green. they're not likely to create a potential advantage for a player whose ball lies in the middle of a long, shallow-faced fairway bunker, smooths footprints 5 yards in front of his ball and on his line of play prior to playing a long shot over the smooth area. Accidentally knocks down several leaves from the tree in his area of intended swing with the practice swing, but there are still so many leaves or branches remaining that the area of intended swing has not been materially affected. So it's not, there's no steadfast rule to say that a situation is always a penalty. There's always the context of that next shot. Another example, players whose ball lies in thick rough 180 yards from the green, walks forward, pulls strands of grass on his line of play and tosses them into the air to determine the direction of the wind. Now, you might have a situation where the player does that directly behind the ball, and that might be a different story. And you might want to ask the player, why'd you do that? And if they were doing it because they wanted to kind of decrease the amount of resistance they had behind the ball, then you'd have a two-stroke penalty. Okay, examples of changes that are likely to create such a potential advantage: repairs a pitch mark through the green or replaces a divot in the hole 5 yards in front of his ball and on his line of play prior to making a stroke from off the putting green that might be affected by the pitch mark or divot hole. So we talked about that. For example, maybe a putt or a low running shot, like I said. A player whose ball lies in a greenside bunker smooths footprints 5 yards in front of his ball on his line of play prior to playing a short shot intended to be played over the smooth area. Accidentally knocks down a single leaf from a tree in his area of intended swing with the practice swing, but as this was one of the very few leaves that might either interfere with his swing or fall and thereby distract him, the area of intended swing has been materially affected. Or, as we talked about here, pull strands of grass from a rough a few inches behind the ball to test the wind, but thereby reduces the distraction, yada, yada, yada. So the determination as to whether a player has created a potential advantage by his actions is made by reference to all the circumstances immediately prior to his stroke. So that's when it all comes down. That's our job as rules officials to determine, did this player create a potential advantage or not? And we have to look at multiple things in order to make that reference. It's not just one single act always being a penalty under 13-2. Okay, however, so we have this, again, there's always exceptions, right? So however, the player incurs no penalty if the action occurs in grounding the club lightly when addressing the ball, in fairly taking their stance, making a stroke or the backward movement of his club for a stroke, and the stroke is made. So if a player goes back and they take their backswing and they knock off a couple branches when they're doing that, as long as they finish a stroke, it's good. If they stop the stroke, then we're going to have a two-stroke penalty if it is indeed changing their area of intended swing. In creating or eliminating irregularities of surface within the teeing ground or removing dew, frost, or water from the teeing ground. And then on the putting green, you can remove sand and loose soil or repair damage, things like ball marks, old hole plugs, not spike marks or anything else until a couple years.
Kyle.
Yeah.
In your third bullet there, in making a stroke with the backward movement of his club for a stroke. If he does not complete the stroke, even if he doesn't touch anything, it's a penalty, but it's only one stroke, correct?
It might be two.
If what happens?
Yeah.
No, if he didn't touch anything.
And, well, how's he improving his line then?
He's not improving anything.
Oh, no.
He stops the stroke.
You can
Oh, no.
stop your
Before he
stroke.
hits it.
Yeah.
It's not a stroke team.
No, it's not stroke penalty at
Finish
all.
the swing.
What's the stroke once he starts down?
Right. It just
Not if he
depends.
checks his swing.
Not if he checks it.
If they check their swing, it's not a penalty. But if they had intent to hit, but okay, so maybe I think maybe the example you're looking at is if a player takes a backswing and it hits a tree, nothing breaks, and then they continue their swing, but they miss the ball. Yeah,
Well, that's a whiff.
So, right. I mean, if they had intent to hit it, then there's going to be a penalty. If not, then there's no penalty.
But if when he hits the tree, he goes, oh, and stops, and no longer intends to hit the ball,
Right.
then it's not
Yeah, there's no penalty unless he
damages.
improve his area of swing.
If he hit the tree and stopped his swing.
So let's say that
His
you
intent was to make a swing, but it stopped because he hit the tree.
right, but
But then he
What
no
are you
longer intends
suggesting?
it.
I don't understand.
Yeah, is he still making a backward stroke, or where's he
it
at?
doesn't matter
doesn't
if it's back.
If he's taking back,
If he stops his swing, he no longer intends to.
Yeah.
no, his stroke starts from the point downward.
You might intend to hit the ball even if he hits the tree.
Right.
Where we at? What's the question?
So
So,
the question is, if a player comes back, he hits the tree, doesn't do anything, and then on his downswing, he decides not to hit the ball and stops.
that's okay.
There's no
Change his
penalty.
mind.
No,
There's
No.
He's no
No
longer
penalty.
intending to hit the
He can
ball.
he can even intentionally miss his ball
Yeah, exactly.
and not be a
Yeah,
stroke.
that happened in
And
the
that's-
pro tour. The guy
Tiger does
swung
that.
over
Yeah,
top
so
of the ball because he heard some noise. You saw him back up and he's trying to stop it and it went over, and he did not get penalized for a stroke.
Yeah.
Didn't even
Yeah,
count as a
Kevin
stroke.
Howard is the video that they show, but basically he decides to voluntarily check, and there's a decision there, I don't know exactly which one it is, but it basically says if the player had no intent to hit the ball, even if they swing over it, if his intent was not to make a stroke, there's no stroke,
No penalty, no
no
stroke.
penalty play on.
It's not like baseball.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, it's not like baseball.
Well, that's
right?
exploited.
That's a good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless he was blind as a ball.
Yeah, and that's the definition of a stroke.
Right.
Or replay.
Yeah, it's in the last.
But if he takes a backswing and he hits a leaf and it comes down and stops, then it's a penalty incurred, right?
Depends upon how many leaves are there.
Yeah.
Depends upon how
It's
many leaves are
subjective.
there.
Yeah.
It's
It
subjective
just depends.
somewhat.
If there were 100 leaves on the tree and you knocked off one, it's not a penalty. If there was 2 leaves on the tree and you knocked off one, it probably would be.
Okay.
I never saw that one in there before until just
Yeah.
read that just.
Right. And then the exception here is Rule 13-4 when the ball is in the hazard. So we know that some of these things, such as grounding your club lightly, is going to be a penalty or a hazard. And if we do some of these other things, touch loose impediments on our backswing, that's going to also be a penalty under Rule 13-4. 13-3, so building a stance. And then the player is entitled to place his feet firmly and take in his stance, but he must not build the stance. So decision 13-2/1 kind of covers what it means to fairly take their stance. So I don't have that here. So basically, just I don't want to read the whole thing here, but the stuff that I have highlighted here. So the use of fairly is intended to limit the player to what is reasonably necessary to take a stance for the selected stroke. And that thus, in taking his stance for the selected stroke, the player should select the least intrusive course of action. So I highlighted that, the least intrusive course of action, which results in the minimum improvement in the position or lie of the ball, area of intended stance or swing, or line of play. And the player is not entitled to a normal stance or swing. So when a player asks, how should I take my stance there? Those are the words I usually use. Is you want to take your stance in the least obtrusive manner. So you may have a tree, and entering from the right side may be obtrusive, the most obtrusive, because you have to brush the tree when you're going by. But if you enter on the other side, you may not have to do that. And so the player, when they're taking their stance, they need to do it in the least obtrusive way. It could be coming from underneath the tree and building your stance. It could be backing in. It could be coming from the left or right, but the player needs to take that least obtrusive way or method to take their stance. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. So, and one thing too, if you see a player just barge in there and starting to stomp stuff down, stop them and then have them start over again. Hopefully they haven't damaged it enough to make a difference. But sometimes they may start to go into an area and they might not break, and we can stop them and say, hey, don't go in that way, come in another way, and then prevent them from getting a penalty.
Kyle,
Yeah.
the way Jeannie always recommends it, you tell the player to put their hands on the club and just back into the tree.
Right.
And they're fine. Tell them not to take their hands and push things on the side.
Right.
Just put their hands on the club,
Right.
back in,
That's
and
great
there's no
advice. Yeah.
problem.
You can use your hip or whatever, but you can't use your hand.
But again, you may have to come in at a different angle though, too.
Right. Yeah, it's not.
It's not
always,
just-
It's not always backing in, but
Yeah.
I think it's good to keep your hands in the club so you don't use those. But you also have to keep track of your body and your legs and stuff as well, because you can't use your legs to pull stuff out of the way or anything like that. You could have to enter from the side, the front, the back, the left. It just depends. But yeah, that's a great way to put it, is to keep your hands in the club.
Although this does say that you can bend the branch of a tree with your hands in order to get under the tree to play a ball.
Sure.
Just
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's not.
once you're in there.
Right, exactly. It's not always,
But then this part is confusing too. It says, backing into a branch or a young sapling, that is the only way to take stance for such a stroke, even if this causes the branch to move out of the way or the sapling to bend or break. So just because you break it doesn't mean it's a penalty.
Well, it all comes down to what was that the least obtrusive way to get in, and if that was the only way to do it, I mean, I don't. Which one is that?
It's
Which
examples of
one?
actions which do constitute fairly taking a stance are. That's the first one.
Okay. So page 176.
Yeah. So if in trying to take a stance, you accidentally break
Right.
something, it's not the same as intentionally breaking it.
And again, it depends
Well,
on
I-
the sapling that you're breaking. If that was in your line of your stroke, that'd be different from a sapling that you've broken that's wouldn't have interfered with your stroke. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference between if it's in your line of stroke or not.
Well, I think it almost it only
It's more
talks
about
about
taking a stance.
the sapling. I want to think that they're really saying for this young tree that's not firmly grown yet, if it does break, then that's okay. I mean that's the way that I read it, is that if it was a branch, it's a different story. But it's really it only says here, even if this causes the branch to move out of the way or the sapling to bend or break. So it really only allows you for that sapling to break, which I think is just that young tree that may not be fully formed yet. That's the way I read that. But if it's a big old evergreen tree and you break a branch, and even if that's the only way in there, it's still going to be a penalty. So you have to be careful.
Right.
Because again, it says here the player is not entitled to a normal stance to swing.
Right.
All right. So the ball and a hazard. Things that are prohibited here. So except as provided in the rules before making a stroke. So key word is a stroke there.
Kyle,
Yes.
it's Tony. You know,
Yeah.
on that decision 13-3/3, the knocking down the sides of a bunker. I mean, how, we've all been in spots where we're at the side of a bunker and we're pushed, to get our feet level, we kind of push down more. Is that against the rule?
Hold on one sec, Tony. I need to get you turned up here a little bit. Sorry about that. Give me 1 minute.
Just try to check here. He's hard of hearing.
All right, Tony. Sorry. Could you repeat that question so everyone here can hear it?
Yeah, for decision 13-3/3 for building a stance, it's knocking down the side of a bunker. And I know I've been in situations where the ball has been below my feet, or it's kind of lower in the bunker, so you wiggle your feet more or less to get deeper in the sand. Is that prohibited in building the stance?
So I think it's more you're not. I guess the way that I look at it, and there's this video that they show in rule school that really kind of shows how this player is building her stance. But really, you're able to move the sand, but you're not able to get it so that it creates a level stance or a more firm stance, I guess you would say, that kind of levels. So if you're on a slope, you're not able to basically push sand so that your feet are more level. You have to basically accept the condition or the uphill downhill lie that you have, and you can't move sand to get on a flatter surface.
But you can kind of wiggle your feet a lot until you get to that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it just determines if you're wiggling for more than like a couple wiggles, then it's probably building your stance and
A 3 wiggle limit.
yeah, I don't know.
Let's make it 4.
But no, I think it's a good question, and yeah, it just kind of it really just depends, but really the rule is put in place so that the player isn't allowed to basically build that stance so that their stance gets level, or that they're not feeling the effects of being up on a side hill lie or downhill lie or something like that. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, but I don't know exactly how many wiggles. It's like the Tootsie Roll pop.
When you see it, you'll know it's
how
wrong.
many licks it takes, but it's different for everyone, I guess.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so 13-4 here. So, but acceptance provided in the rules before making a stroke. So I think it's important that we go back to the definition and just get our minds on what exactly is a stroke, because it does make a difference in this and how we interpret this rule. So the stroke is the forward movement of the club made with the intention of striking at and moving the ball. But if a player checks his downswing voluntarily before the club head reaches the ball, he has not made a stroke. So the key thing here is the forward movement of the club, and then with the intention of striking at and moving the ball. So when we're talking about a stroke, we're not talking that has nothing to do with the backswing. The backswing is not the stroke. The backswing or the stroke starts when you start the forward motion. And then at the ball, it's in a hazard, whether a bunker or water hazard, or that, having not been lifted from a hazard, may be dropped or placed in a hazard. The player must not test the condition of the hazard or any similar hazard, touch the ground in the hazard or water in the water hazard with his hand or a club, or touch or move a loose impediment lying in or touching the hazard. And so, but however, there's a few exceptions here. Provided that nothing is done that constitutes testing the condition of the hazard or improves the lie of the ball, there is no penalty if the player touches the ground or loose impediments in any hazard or water in a water hazard as a result or to prevent falling. In removing an obstruction, so think of that as a bunker or a rake in a bunker. In measuring or marking the position of, retrieving, lifting, placing, or replacing a ball under any rule, or they're allowed to place their clubs in a hazard. So at any time, the player may smooth sand or soil in a hazard, provided this is for the sole purpose of caring for the course and nothing is done to breach Rule 13-2 with respect to their next stroke. So we kind of touched about that a little bit earlier, but there are certain things that you can do that, as long as it doesn't influence your next stroke, if it was done for care of the course, it's okay. So going back, Mike, to your example of the divots there, if they're just doing that to fix the course and it doesn't affect their next stroke, great. No problem there. Okay, and then if the ball is played from a hazard is outside the hazard, the player may smooth sand or soil in the hazard without restriction. So once the ball's out, they can smooth the sand, whereas before that wasn't always the case. So I believe before that was if the ball stayed in the bunker, they couldn't rake in that bunker. Correct?
Even in a forward bunker.
Even if it was a different bunker.
Yeah.
It was before?
Yeah, that was I think like 2012.
Yeah,
was when
usually
fixed
they
that.
changed that.
Yeah. Well, I shouldn't say fixed when they changed it.
Revised.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then point 3 here, if the player makes a stroke from a hazard and the ball comes to rest in another hazard, Rule 13-4 does not apply to any subsequent actions taken in the hazard from which the stroke is made. So if someone's in a bunker and they bladed out of it into another bunker, as long as it's not the same bunker, they can get pissed off and hit their club into the sand. There's no penalty. But if it's within that same bunker, they're going to get a 2-stroke penalty for doing that.
But I can, if I'm, before I hit my shot out of the bunker, I can't walk over to another bunker and take a practice swing.
Right.
But after I've hit my shot in the first bunker, I can take a practice swing and hit it into another bunker. I can take a practice swing in that old bunker.
I think that's the case, right?
That's what it
Yeah,
says, and that
yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what it
Right.
says.
Well, you can't be testing it anymore because you already hit out of it, so.
It might have limited the guy that's just swinging at the ball after he
It's
chunked the shot. You swing the glove again.
Wouldn't that count as a practice stroke and you can't take a practice stroke in a bunker?
I don't know, I mean, that's the question. But
it's-
you're not, their ball is not in that bunker.
It could be like you said, they're just swinging at it, and not really thinking about it as a practice
On
stroke.
a green or nearby the green, but not in a bunker, right?
Would that be
But
considered
that's not a
condi-
practice. swing.
testing the conditions of the bunker?
What
I
is
mean,
it?
after the play.
It's after, it wouldn't be considered a practice,
It's just,
because you've hit the ball.
it's just a mad swing.
It's just
Right.
anger.
Anger. You weren't testing much.
It's just anger and it costs you too.
Your mental.
But what if it wasn't anger? What if I wanted, this says that I can't take a practice swing in another bunker before I hit the ball, but after I've hit the ball
Out of that bunker.
out of that bunker, it goes into another bunker, I can hit that bunker I just left.
Right.
Okay, 13-4 slash A. Test the condition of the hazard or any similar hazard.
Right. But
That's where you can't test that. You're testing the condition of that hazard.
right, and then the
Yeah, that's what I'm
the
saying is
exception
prohibited.
allows
Right. You can't do it.
But it says, yeah, the
Yeah, but the exception allows you to do it between bunkers.
Right.
Basically, is what he's saying. Is that it's
that's
not,
where
it's,
I'm saying is inconsistent.
it's not consistent because in one case you can go test it, in the other case you can or you can't or whatever.
What did you say?
Well, you've already
13
tested by trying to hit out of it, I guess.
Well, that's
Right,
what Patty said.
you're
You
out
said
of it.
13-4 what? I thought you said A.
Yeah, but
That's
You hit the shot out.
That's what I'm reading.
Oh,
you're
you're
not
still
on
up
the
here.
hazard side.
Yeah, so
Out of
so
that
13-4A, like
you'll
Craig
have-
said,
yeah.
it says that you can't
Yeah, like
test
if you're gonna hit
the
it,
hazard
whatever,
or
hit
any
it back,
similar hazard.
over back in the other.
It says
bunker.
13-4A,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
already
test the
rated.
condition,
Improve.
does not apply to any subsequent actions taken in the hazard from which the stroke was made.
Right.
So it's specifically saying that test the condition of the hazard or any similar hazard doesn't apply once you've already hit it
Once you've been in a hazard,
Right.
and you hit it out of the hazard.
and you hit it out of the hazard. Then that doesn't apply to that hazard anymore.
Yeah, it's in the rules. I agree with you, Lee. This seems in, why not just make it consistent? So
Or maybe they'll word it better.
Is that when that changes?
well, I think 2019 they'll be able to take practice swings, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna ground your club in hazards.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, no, sorry, that's not the case.
Maybe
right?
not in bunkers, but in
Not in
hazards.
bunkers. In bunkers.
But in
you can.
penalty areas.
In penalty areas you can. And that was one of the things that Mark Wilson had the biggest complaint about to the USGA was he thought that those areas should be treated the same because right now they are, and when they're switching to 19, you're going to be able to take a practice swing in a penalty area,
Move loose
but
impediments.
not in a bunker.
Yeah.
Oops, yeah, I probably should have plugged that.
But you'll be able to ground your club in.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, you can stand on your club in the bunker. You just
So I thought penalty
can't ground it in
included
front of or
bunkers.
behind the ball. So if you're standing on your club and it's off to your side, I just went through this the other day.
Right.
Where?
You can
No.
lean on your
No,
club.
no,
You can lean on your club and have-
Only if you're trying to protect from falling.
I'm sorry?
No, I think
No.
that's right. I don't think it's.
So it
Where
says.
does it say that? I don't know. Where'd you-
Let's wait and see what they do to each one.
32.
Are you talking about next year, you mean?
Next year.
19, yeah.
Oh, 19.
What was the question?
18, 19.
19.
That you could stand clean on your club in the bunker.
Yeah.
Next year you can?
Yes.
Kyle, we're gonna do 2 week next year?
Huh?
We're gonna do 2 week next year?
2 days. 2 days.
Tuesdays and
2
Thursdays?
days. Yeah.
You'll be 2 all week.
What we need is a mind wash.
Right.
Yeah.
Reset.
Forget all the old rules.
Yeah, so there. I mean, obviously, this is going to change next year, but in this year, these are the restrictions that we're under. Which I think everyone, I think most golfers understand what they can't and can't, or what they can and cannot do in a bunker. I think it's a little bit more confusing when they're outside the bunker. I think that everyone is taught that you can't ground your club in a bunker. But when you're improving your area of swing outside the bunker, that's where it's a little bit confusing. I know when I was growing up playing, I had no idea, and I would go into those heather and take as many practices as I could to figure out how thick it was, and then also to clear out some of my play. And I had no idea I was breaking rules. Right, so I think that the hazard is something that's more ingrained when people are learning, whereas outside is not. So when we're out there officiating, we need to keep that in mind that, especially when we're in heather courts that have a lot of heather or a lot of trees, we need to kind of be on the ready to stop the player from breaking those rules, because chances are you're going to see it happen.
So the inconsistency that I see is that if you're taking a swing from a water hazard and you brush grass or something like that, it's not a penalty. But if you're taking a swing in a bunker and you brush any grains of sand, it is a penalty.
Grains of sand versus grass, yes. I mean, but it's different. If you're in a hazard and you take a backswing and you hit a loose impediment, that's a penalty. So I guess it's
Yeah, but I meant tree or growing things.
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and that's what happened. I think it was in 2010 at the Hilton Head event. The guy was in a playoff. Brian Davis, I think his name was, and he was on the left side on the 18th hole there, and there was a little reed about this long or whatever that was detached, and he touched it on his backswing, and he called the penalty on himself and then cost him the tournament. Yeah. Whereas if that thing was fixed in the ground, like you were saying, Patty, if it was fixed in the ground and he hit it, there wouldn't have been a problem. Or if he would have hit it on his way down, there wouldn't have been an issue. But since it was on his way back, it's a penalty. And I know that I get that question a lot from players when I'm out there is, what can I do here when I'm a hazard? I always tell them, make sure on your way back you're not touching anything loose. On the way forward, do whatever you want. But just be careful on the way back. All right, and then note here, at any time, including at address or in the backward movement of the stroke, the backward movement for the stroke, the player may touch with a club or otherwise any obstruction, any construction declared by the committee to be an integral part of the course, or any grass, bush, tree, or other growing thing. So that's kind of what we talked about there. But also, if a player was on a cart path or a bridge inside of a hazard, they could ground their club in those areas on that obstruction. And for Rule 13-2 and 13-4, penalty and match play is going to be a loss of hole, and then stroke play will be 2 strokes. And here's some key decisions. Anyone wants to jot those down?
(13-214) makes no sense to me.
13-2/14.
Yes. You're allowed to smooth down the teeing ground. You're allowed to remove tufts of grass from the teeing ground. But once in a while, the rovers set the tee boxes so that there's a branch or a bush overhanging or in the teeing ground, and you can improve that area.
Is that a dig there?
Huh?
Is that a dig to rovers? Your ball's not in play at that point, right?
But you can't
On the team ground, your ball's not been put into play yet.
That's the
Yes, but
argument
it's saying
that
here,
it
it's a
says it
penalty
goes
if
the
you
other
break
way.
off a branch or you improve the team ground by removing,
Well, yeah, you can't break off a branch.
it's in the team ground.
Right, so
That's why it makes no sense to me,
Yeah.
because you can remove tufts of grass, you can remove any irregularities.
Can't touch doing water anywhere else.
right.
You touch, yeah, you can, you
Well, I
can
think-
move doing water.
I
on
think
the team
it's-
ground.
it's-
Step down behind the
It's
ball.
really put in there to protect the field, right? Because if you're player 60 to go through there and you break that branch, then for the other players behind you, it's a quote unquote different golf course that their team from because they don't have that. I mean, I think that's probably the way that they justify it. I mean, I have a note in here on that decision. Should be avoided by properly setting tees. So if that's the case, and someone mentioned Gowney, and Gowney's a great example on that first hole there. If you're not careful, someone's going to take a backswing. So I know when I'm out setting tees, I always simulate a stroke, right-handed, left-handed, from both sides of the tees. If I see something wrong there, to make sure there's nothing in the way, because that's the last thing that you want is someone to swing and hit that tree. And I don't know if I've seen it at Gowney, but I've seen people re-tee because they take a practice swing on that left side of the tee box there. And they get up and they get close to hitting the tree, or they hit the tree, and then they pick up the ball and they move it over to the right. So,
Just
yeah,
doesn't seem like you're improving anything before you play.
right.
Yeah, as you say, it's
Yeah,
the
The
field.
answer is
I think
to the
yeah,
greenskeeper.
it's more just sort of feel. It's kind of like the same thing.
It's a field thing, yeah.
When a player moves the tee, they're not allowed to move the tee marker because it just creates a different tee box for the rest of the field. even if the tee was poorly set in that case. All right, any questions? No? All right, we're gonna switch over to some practice test questions here. No, that's quite big enough for that. All right, we're gonna start at the bottom and work our way up because I think last year we started at the top.
All right.
You have to make sure you get at least more than the first one.
Yeah.
Maybe I thought the same thing last year and we'll just do the ones over again. But all right, so a match play club championship was scheduled over 3 consecutive days. The committee has not provided in the conditions of the competition any special provisions regarding practice. On the evening after the second match, a player played 3 holes at the club on the competition course with his daughter. Which of the following is true? A, the player incurs no penalty. B, the player incurs a 1-hole adjustment to the state of his next match applied after the first hole is completed. C, the competitor incurs a 2-hole adjustment to the state of his next match applied after the first hole is completed, or the competitor is disqualified from the club championship. Any guesses?
A.
All right.
Penalty.
So the answer is A, because in match play, there are very limited, or actually there are no restrictions on practicing, so that the player is allowed to go out there and play. Now, if it was stroke play, what would the answer be? D. Yep.
Would be B?
D.
No.
Isn't
that what
Competitor disqualified.
Yeah.
You said D?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
If
I
it-
thought you said B.
I did too.
I did too.
No, B's in the dot.
Yeah.
I'm looking at B
is
as
in
about
no
the
here.
match play. I said, wait a minute, which is strong? Okay, D.
All right. In stroke play, a player plays a new ball from the team ground and it comes to rest in the fairway. He then sculls the second shot to the fringe of the putting green. Upon arriving at the ball, he sees a huge cut in it. In ignorance, and without saying anything to his fellow competitors, he marks the position of his ball prior to lifting it, substitutes a new ball for the cut ball, and completes the play of the hole. After he returns his scorecard, but before the close of competition, the committee becomes aware of the incident. What is the ruling? A, the committee should add 1 stroke penalty to his score. B, the committee should add the general penalty, 2 strokes to his score. C, the committee should add 3 strokes to the score, 1 for breach of rule 5-3, ball unfit for play, and 2 for breach of rule 6-6D, wrong score for a hole. And the committee should disqualify him since he was aware of the facts, and therefore the exception to rule 6-6D, wrong score for hole, does not apply.
Probably missed this.
This is a tough one.
So he said it, probably missed this.
So what do we know for sure is happening? We know he's getting.
He substituted a ball when he shouldn't have. That's a good deal.
I'm not sure.
Well, he marked the ball that he should have.
He's for
Not
sure
allowed to mark.
he's touched the ball inappropriately when he picked it up without saying anything.
He hasn't followed the procedure on
So there's one.
right.
Is that 1 stroke or 2?
One.
That's 1 stroke. So we have that, and then the next question we need to answer. Okay, so that rules out B, right?
See.
Yeah.
So then is it?
Now, what do they mean by it's new ball? Just means he,
Change balls.
So he's
which is
substituted
fine
the ball,
unless
now
you're
he's
in a
moving the ball.
one.
So let's say in this
One ball
example,
rule, in
let's
which case.
let's make the assumption that the player's ball was unfit for play, and he or she just proceeded incorrectly, so they're getting the 1 stroke.
Right.
Now we need to determine, is the player getting that additional 2 stroke penalty and making the answer C, or is they not going to get it and the answer is A? So after he returns his scorecard before the close of the competition, the committee becomes aware of the incident.
A.
Yeah, when equity, he didn't really do anything wrong other than.
See.
He recorded the wrong hole for a score though.
Got a
Yeah,
wrong
so
score
he-
too.
But he put down a 5 when his score should have gone
6.
a 6.
6.
Yeah.
He was gonna get the penalty plus the 2,
Right.
But not
No.
disqualified.
not disqualified.
Right.
Except when we put the local rule in.
The local rule is gonna be in effect this year.
Right.
We're not gonna add the additional 2.
So last year the answer would be C, and this year the answer is going to be A,
Right.
because of that local rule that's going to be put in place.
Okay.
What's the local rule say?
It's saying that the player will not get that additional 2 stroke penalty for having a wrong score.
Oh, for signing.
For a penalty he didn't know.
That they did not know
Sure.
that they incurred. Right. And so in this question, we don't really know if the player knew or did not know. It didn't say, so we have to assume that the player didn't know if it didn't say.
Well, that's it.
Okay, you're right. Okay, maybe you're right. There it is. All right.
Yeah, said in ignorance.
It did say that. So that kind of clarifies that. All right. So in which of the following cases may a player drop his ball without penalty? His ball is inside a water hazard, but his stance is through the green and is in casual water. B, his ball is outside of a water hazard and through the green, but his stance is inside the hazard on a rock wall. C, his ball has disappeared down an underground drain pipe, the entrance of which is inside a water hazard. And his ball is inside a water hazard and his swing is interfered with by a water hazard stake, which is not removable.
Water hazard stake is removable, so it can't be D.
Why can't it be B?
Because that water hazard stake is removable.
I would think it'd be B because his stance is.
What says his stance is in casual water, he wasn't in the hazard.
Wait, are we supposed to do more than one?
No, there's only one answer.
So Kyle, which one you
I would
Is
say
the
A.
casual water outside of the hazard then on A?
On A,
Yeah.
his stance is through the green and is in casual water, but the ball is inside the hazard.
So you can't
But
do
it's
that
illegal
from
to
casual
play
water
the-
if you're standing there, right?
But see, it says right here, but the
Not if your
entrance
ball's
is
in the
inside the hazard.
But casual water doesn't have.
See, isn't it? No, his ball is.
His ball's in the hazard in A, and he can't get relief for stance.
I'll say why, 'cause
I say C.
B.
See,
You
Say
can
yes.
stand inside the hazard.
Let's talk through each
right?
one. You can rule them out.
Okay.
B, I see.
Okay. So
Let's
let's
argue about it.
so let's start with A. So his ball is inside a water hazard, but it stands to the green in casual water.
So if you drop the ball, he still has to take it.
Exactly. He can't drop the ball without penalty when his ball is in a water hazard. If he wants to take relief, he needs to take relief from the hazard. So that's not the answer. B, his ball is outside of a water hazard and through the green, but his stance is inside the hazard on the rock wall. So that rock wall is going to be an immovable obstruction, and when you do get relief from an immovable obstruction when your stance or your swing or your ball or your area of your ball is affected. So that's our answer. B. C. C. His ball has disappeared down an underground drain pipe, the entrance of which is inside a water hazard. So in that case, we don't know. I mean, unless we know that the ball went through the underground pipe and is in an area not in the hazard,
It's assumed.
then it's assumed that it's in the hazard.
See,
So
he
you
couldn't
might-
drop it he couldn't retrieve his ball and drop it in the hazard without penalty?
No, it'd be the same thing for A. If his ball is in the hazard, he has to, in order to take relief. He doesn't get relief from an immovable obstruction inside the hazard.
I'm gonna apply the reading rules.
What's the
Well,
reason?
and that's
Do
when
what you
we go
want.
out and mark the golf courses.
Is this shades of last year, shitty rule?
But yeah, so when we're going out to mark the golf course, we typically, if we have a chance to include or not include an obstruction in the hazard, we always try to leave it out so that the players get relief. Or if we think that it's going to be a situation that's going to just confuse people, we'll put it in the hazard so they don't get relief. So you might have a fence or something like that, or you might have a sprinkler head. You may go around with the red line and not include it so that the player, if they did have interference from that and the ball was not in the hazard, they would get relief. But if it was in the hazard, they would not get relief from that.
So they all want to do, you don't see a penalty on, it's got to be C. Which one did you pick? Was B, wasn't it?
B.
Yeah, the answer is B. The answer is
B is in baseball.
B is in baseball. B is in boy. And then D, his ball is inside a water hazard and the swing is interfered with by a water hazard stake, which is not removable. So in that case, you're still in a water hazard, you don't get relief in that. So that kind of touches on another thing, that hazard stakes can be deemed immovable obstructions by the committee. So a lot of times you'll see this, if the course doesn't allow us to put down red paint for a hazard, we will make those stakes immovable obstructions so that they don't move from group to group. So we had, in my previous job, or one of my previous jobs, we had to do that at a course in California where they had a tour event. They wouldn't let us mark the course because we were there within a month of the event. And so we had to move the stakes to do stake to stake, and we declared them immovable obstructions.
Does that apply also if the ball
So
was
that was
outside
just
the
something you
hazard?
added to the hard card.
Yeah, to the rule sheet.
Yeah.
If your ball was outside the hazard, you could still remove the hazard stake, wouldn't you?
No, so if a committee declares it to be an immovable obstruction, you cannot.
No matter
Well,
where your ball
if the
is.
ball is outside the hazard, you get relief from immovable obstruction.
Right. Yeah, you just wouldn't be able to move it. You would get relief. You wouldn't move it. Okay, do we get over there?
We're good. I'm looking for that decision about the ball in a drain pipe within a hazard. It tells you must take relief under 26-1. But I'm looking for
I think
this.
it's
Is it under 24 or
I think
26?
it's 25 or 24.
This is a close book.
Yeah, it's 24-3. 24-3B/1.
No such thing as a closed book.
So let's see here. A player's ball goes into an underground drain pipe, but he cannot reach it or identify it. Are you sure this is it?
Yeah, the second paragraph of that answer.
If the entrance to the underground drain pipe or culvert is in a water hazard.
That brings up a good point. I was gonna say, how do you identify a wall?
If the entrance to the underground drain pipe or culvert is in a water hazard, Rule 24-3B applies, and the player is not entitled to relief without penalty and must proceed under Rule 26-1.
It's just like you require virtual certainty the ball's in a hazard anyway, right?
Yeah.
In order to take relief under 26-1, so.
Right. So so one example that I had down here, and I think I shared it last year as well, but when I was at an event and this player hit her tee shot right down the middle of the fairway, and we were all by the tee and we saw it go down the middle of the fairway. We saw it bounce a couple times, and we went out there to look for it. We couldn't find it. We walked out to the middle of the fairway. There was a drain pipe about yay big in the middle of the fairway. And ultimately, the person in charge of the event, they decided that she had to go back to the tee. Whereas I thought the ball was definitely in there. We saw it bounce a couple of times in the fairway. But that would be a situation where the rules person there decided that there wasn't virtual certainty. They made her go back and replay. And so it really comes down to do you have virtual certainty? And I can see that. I can see their point. Whereas we were 230 yards or 240 yards away, how could we tell with virtual certainty that ball went in there? But we have to look at and identify all the other circumstances, such as is there really anywhere else the ball could be?
Well, here, a stupid question. Do you need virtual certainty for a drain pipe? Or isn't virtual certainty just applied to a water hazard?
No, it's also for a ball loss and
an obstruction
as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
95%.
Yeah. 19 out of 20.
Yeah.
95, wonderful. Between 95 and 96.
All right, question 99 here. The player is required to mark the position of his ball before lifting it in which of the following situations? He has deemed his ball unplayable and intends to drop within 2 club lengths of where it lay. He wishes to take relief from a cart path, but he has not yet determined his nearest point of relief. His ball at rest was moved by an outside agency, and he is going to replace it. He has been asked to lift because it interferes with a fellow competitor's next stroke. So this is what a person is required to mark the position of the ball.
D.
All right. Good job.
And written into the wrong answers is as long as your 2 club length relief is within where the ball lies, you don't have to mark it beforehand, right?
For
Like a unplayable ball.
Yeah.
well, if you're taking an unplayable,
Close enough.
it actually doesn't matter. If you're taking an unplayable, it's not a requirement to mark the ball. You can say that you're going to take an unplayable, pick that ball up, and then do whatever. But if you're using that 2 club lengths, you should know where the ball is. But it's not required to actually mark it.
Is it recommended, suggested?
I'm not sure if it's
Would you normally do it?
but
It's recommended you leave the ball there before you and take your 2
Right.
club lengths where the ball lies. Yeah.
right. But I mean, you have to have a general idea. But there's not a penalty for not marking it.
A way to look at it is when your ball, that ball, has a spot on the course, you got to put it back on that spot. The other 3, that ball doesn't yet have a spot on the course.
Right.
So you got to mark it if you're going to put it back on that spot.
All right, so 98. Which action is permitted when a player's ball is in a hazard? So we should all know this answer after today. A, placing an object such as clubs or rake in a hazard. B, touching the ground in another similar hazard with a practice swing. C, touching the water in a water hazard with a club. Or D, touching the ground in a hazard during the backswing for a stroke which is made. Or B, in your case, B with the exception.
Yeah. Lee does B all the time over at Oakland Hills, right?
Yeah.
That's the new rule.
It's a local rule at Oakland Hills.
All right.
Whatever makes you happy.
All right. In stroke play, a player's ball is on the putting green. This caddy shows him the line of putting by pointing at it with the flag stick, and in doing so accidentally touches the putting green with the flag stick. The player incurs no penalty since the action was not intentional. No penalty as long as the flag stick is moved before the player putts. A one-stroke penalty. D, a two-stroke penalty.
A.
I think it's
Okay.
It's a penalty, and if it's one or two. And so this is something that I think this is a tough question, because I mean, I know when I'm reading this, I know it's a penalty, but do I know if it's one or two? And so you have to think about, okay, is it one or two? And this is a tough one for a closed book.
Were you going to give us how you would determine whether it's one or two, or are you just going to say it's
I would, yeah. And I would go for it and look at it and see, okay, this is obviously under rule 17 or 16, and so I'm not sure exactly which rule is under. I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking in most cases those penalties and those rules it's two strokes. Yeah. So I'm going to say it's a two-stroke, because it's the same thing. It's a two-stroke. It's a two-stroke penalty when you're involved in the putting green, someone else is involved in the putting green, you hit it. So that's kind of the thought process I would go through when determining. But if I was on a golf course and not taking a test, I would just look it up.
It's got to be under 16.
So you think it's two strokes? The
Yeah.
answer is it's two strokes.
It is two strokes. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, typically throughout the
pretty severe.
rules, it's a one-stroke penalty for what you might think of as a technical violation.
Yeah.
You violated a rule, but you didn't get any advantage from it. That's one stroke. Two strokes is put in so that when you touch it and you shouldn't, that you don't get an advantage beyond the penalty. This one is a hard one, like Kyle says, because it would seem to be right in between. You could go either way on the one or the two. It was an accident. He really didn't gain any advantage. I mean, the golfer could have seen the stick an inch above before he touched the green, so you could go either way on it.
And then you've got all those other penalties now that if it's not your intention, it's not a penalty.
If the wind is blowing and
No, I don't mean now.
You
I don't mean new. I mean,
and a gust of wind and it makes you move, touch the. That is an accident. But so why would you get penalized two strokes? But that's what it's going to say, because it touched the ground.
To make sure that he didn't get an advantage beyond
Yeah.
the violation of the
Right,
rule.
touching the line.
And next
So
year,
you
you
look-
take a roller and roll the whole area,
Yeah.
and that'll be fine.
As long as what you're forfeiting back. So,
I got a new piece of equipment I'm putting in my golf bag.
Yeah.
It's just-
As long as it fits in your bag.
Yeah.
but no, it's actually interesting. So I looked it up really quick. You know, I made the assumption it's in rule 16 or 17. I look in 16, I see a note there that says see rule 8-2. So it's an 8-2. So I honestly don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm a good guesser. So it's actually 18-2B. So indicating the line of play, and it's on the putting green, and that's where you have the two-stroke penalty. But it is in rule 16.
18.2, yeah.
And it does
It's 16.1.
it does reference it in 16, but it points you back to rule 8-2. Yeah, I think that's one thing, and that's one I think criticism of this rules test is that does it really test? I mean, obviously it tests a person's knowledge, but in reality, if I was in that situation, I wouldn't rely on my memory. I would go and find it really quickly to make sure I was right. And maybe it's something that I should know, but I think the way that people take a test and the way that they actually rules officiate are a little bit different. So if you do take the test and you do great, don't assume that you're a good rules official. Whereas on the flip side, if you take it and you do bad, don't assume you're a bad rules official. Because just your score on the test doesn't really indicate how good of a rules official you are on the golf course.
Must be personality.
All right, 96. Which of the following is true? Manufactured ice is an obstruction. Snow and natural ice other than frost are either obstructions or casual water at the option of the player. Dew and frost are casual water. And a player may mop up casual water between his ball and hole when on the putting green.
Okay. Good.
Just gotta make sure. All right.
You looked it up?
Yeah. He
I
looked
had to
at,
make sure it was. I was between A and B, and I was pretty sure A was right, but I just wanted to double check that B was not correct. So I think
it's loose impediments instead of
it's
casual water, right?
impediments instead of
Casual water. Right.
Instead of no, I think instead of obstructions, right?
Well, it says obstructions or.
I think it's casual water or
I don't think there's an option to the player. It's got to be casual water.
No, there is
there is an option.
there is an option for. What definition is that? Is that
Probably loose impediments.
snow and natural ice, other than frost, are either casual water or loose impediments. So it's not an obstruction. It's either. You're right.
That's what I said, Craig.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I was wrong many times before. So, all right.
Nice to feel you're right once in a while.
Hey, a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. All right. 95. The player lifts his ball in the putting green and replaces it with his lucky putting ball. He then holds out his lucky putting ball is a
Wrong ball.
wrong ball, substituted ball, second ball, provisional ball. So we know it's not C or D. So is it a wrong ball or is it a substituted ball?
Substitute ball.
It shouldn't be substituted.
Incorrectly substituted ball.
Right.
Right.
But that makes it a wrong ball, doesn't it?
no,
No, it's been incorrectly
It's a
substituted.
substituted ball. It's not.
So it's a penalty, but
Yeah, it's not a wrong ball. Because a wrong ball would be
Somebody else will do it.
a ball that's not yours. This
Oh.
ball is his.
Okay,
He just substituted when he wasn't permitted to do
right,
so.
okay.
So he gets that 2-stroke penalty there.
a wrong ball is not his ball in play, provisional or second ball.
Right.
Once he puts this ball, that becomes his ball in play, so it doesn't fit the definition of wrong ball.
Right.
So once the
Two
Two-strokes.
John Rollins likes to use a analogy where a ball on the ground that you play is, if it's not your ball, it's a wrong ball. It's been on the ground, it's there. A ball that leaves your hand and gets played is going to be a ball played from the wrong place. That's the distinction between wrong ball and wrong place in I think in all cases. So in other words, if you find a ball out of bounds, a player plays a ball out of bounds, it's not from the wrong place, it's a wrong ball. But if a ball leaves your hand and gets played, and it's like, say you take relief from the wrong spot, take 3 club lanes instead of 2, that's going to be a wrong place instead of a wrong ball.
Yeah, but if you substitute a ball and put it in the same place, it wouldn't be a wrong place.
Well, and also it's left your hand anyway, so it wouldn't be
Right.
a wrong ball.
It's a substitute ball.
Lost you dropped the ball. Yeah.
All right. A player's ball comes to rest inbounds next to an OB stake, which interferes with her stance. Without penalty, she may remove the out-of-bounds stake before her next stroke as long as it's readily movable. Nope. Take free relief from the stake by determining the nearest point of relief and drop within 1 club length. No. Push the out-of-bounds stake out of the way with her hands, provided the stake remains in the ground properly defining the boundary line. No. Fairly take her stance even if that results in the out-of-bounds stakes being pushed to the side.
It's the only one left.
No, it's
So it must be D then, right?
not B.
Well, keywords being
But
fairly
wouldn't
take
that
her
be a
stand.
removable obstruction, so should get relief?
No, not from something that determines out of bounds or a boundary of the course. So it'd be like a fence that runs around the outside of the course.
Yeah.
If that defines out of bounds, and they're not going to get.
Oh, that's a local rule at Plunbrook.
Number
Wrong.
89 in Hills North, it says fence it, you try to put their butt through back into it.
Because I was thinking since it's a stake, it's not like it's keeping you from,
not like a
standing
ball.
outside out of bounds, which you can do.
Right.
So, but, yeah, okay.
Yeah, Yeah, if it defines the boundary line or out of bounds, you don't get relief from it. But in this case, she can fairly take her stance, and the stake being pushed to the side. That's okay. It'd be the same thing if she was up against a fence. She could take her and she could push the fence to take her stance, or put her foot on the fence and take her stance. There wouldn't be anything wrong there doing that.
If the stake is dislodged, what happens? Then she was deemed to have moved the stake?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so she can
lean
do it,
on,
but not
but
just
she can't
lie.
get it to knock out. Yeah, right.
So if it's laying on the ground and the ball's laying right next to it, you can move the stake.
If it's laying on the ground,
If it's on the ground,
Yeah, if it's not in the place that it should be, then yeah.
Yeah.
But let's say that it's still in the ground and it fell over and just when I was out marking the golf course, I was too lazy to go over and pick it up.
Wind blew it over.
In that case, they may not if it's still in the ground.
At that point, as the rules official, shouldn't you put it back before the stroke is taken?
you wouldn't have to.
No.
Player wouldn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Player wouldn't, but if you're the rules official and you're there, you should put it back, should you not?
I don't think I would.
I don't think I would
move
do
it.
that.
Oh, and after the shot?
The only reason I say that is because I wouldn't want it to be different for the rest of the field. So if it was out of the ground and it was just laying loose there, yes, I would move it back.
Probably a matter of discretion, but I can
Right.
tell you where it happened was out at Prestwick Village. It wasn't marked. Their little flower bed came in, and there was a stake there, but it had been moved up and sort of out of the way. Somebody called me over, and I mean, it was obvious that it was there, but I'm thinking, geez, just what you're saying.
Right.
How many people have come through here? So I called in, and I won't say the name, but the person that was in charge said, no, put it back.
Right.
yeah, what if you're leaning against the stake and it comes up?
And another
shot.
shot, there's two good sides to it.
If it was in the shot, I would say that it'd be okay, but I'd have to look that one up to make sure. I mean,
Because a lot of times that ball is right up to the stake in that, in your
Right.
your stance, and you're leaning against it, and a lot of those stakes are not in.
right, sure.
And it falls out. What happens then?
Well, it would sort of be like, I guess in the process of the stroke, then it wouldn't be like you thinking of other rules. It wouldn't be like, be like breaking a branch, and as long as you finish the stroke, it shouldn't be, right? I don't think so.
Those are movable.
That's the way that I would think about
Unless
it
the
as
committee
well.
defines it as immovable, then you can't.
So if I'm
Some of those
beside a
stakes are
creek
very
loose and it's a low bridge, the low bridge is in my way.
Not what our crew
My
is.
shot's I don't care anything because the bridge.
It takes
I've
two
seen
extra
quite a
legs
few,
to discover to put in
Which is,
stake.
which is an immovable.
So I don't care anything like, you know,
Power box.
Oh, great.
We don't need that. It's not so sure.
I'll have to look into
Stands
that
on
one
the ball.
a little bit further. My gut tells me that if it was during the stroke and it moved after the stroke, it'd be okay. Just because they're not improving their area of intended play, or they're not improving that shot because that shot's already passed.
Here we go.
If a player takes a out of bounds stake out of the ground, I mean, he's already got the two. He can even, yeah, even if he puts it back in, he's still got the two. He may as well leave it out because he's.
Yeah, I did that. So one of my first.
Would you tell him to put it back in?
No.
No, you probably
I tell him not to.
Tell him not to, exactly. So one of my first events that I worked, I had that happen where the player pulled it out, the stake, and then I thought maybe if they put it back before they hit, they wouldn't get a penalty, so I told them to put it back. I found out later that wasn't the case. Yeah, whatever. He didn't really care. It was like a 3-wood or something like that. I mean, he just moved his swing around it. So, but yeah, so that's how I learned that. So I think that's just maybe it's a good example, but you're going to learn by making mistakes out there, and hopefully it's not something like. Hopefully it's something small like that where it doesn't really affect.
Determine.
Right.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. All right. Which of the following is a foursome? Oh, geez. Okay. Two single matches being played in one group. A match in which two players play their better ball against the better ball of 2 other players. C, in stroke play, a group of 4 players consisting of 2 sides. Each side is playing 1 ball, alternating strokes throughout the hole, or 4 players playing in their own balls in individual stroke play. C.
Play some of the time.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so
Alternate.
the way that I always
Yeah.
think about this is I just think to the Ryder Cup or just a line cup or whatever, and just say it's 4 ball and foursomes. Foursomes is alternate shot.
Forcing they hit the ball some of the time.
Right.
Yep.
And that's what I was thinking about. I just picked the wrong one of those. I did see it. I thought the better ball if there was the same
Well,
thing.
that's 4 ball.
What is D then? What's
D is just individual stroke play.
It's just, yeah.
What's the name of it?
Stroke play.
Individual stroke play.
Individual stroke play.
So next foursome on the T
So-
is
Yeah,
So they
it's-
wanted
well,
to-
so-
Two?
That's the starter ball. What is it?
So the actual definition of a foursome is alternate shot, essentially. Now, if you had talked to, any most golfers, if they say a foursome, it's just the 4 people that are playing.
Yeah.
But in the actual rules, it's alternate shot.
So starters never say that.
Well, no, I mean,
Next group, I'll.
Next group.
you can say foursome, it doesn't matter. I mean,
Usually our starter.
Yeah, it's-
Well, isn't there 4 ball? That's, it's 2 players, they're hitting all their shots, but they pick the best score.
Yes.
correct.
That's 4 ball,
Correct.
right?
Yes. All right, which of the following is not an abnormal ground condition unless declared so by the committee? A hole left when a 150-yard marker was removed, mud, grass cuttings piled for removal next to a putting green, water overflowing the margins, or a surface drainage ditch marked as a lateral water hazard.
Mud. If there was a lot of mud, couldn't the committee, declare that abnormal ground condition?
Unless it's staked out.
Unless,
Unless it's marked.
our crew paints it, then it is.
Must not be
Otherwise,
D.
No, it is.
Quiet.
It is. So we know that grass cuttings piled for removal are in the definition of ground under repair, which is an abnormal ground condition. This one here, water overflowing and marked as a lateral water hazard, is not. Is a lateral water hazard, and then this hole is not an abnormal ground condition.
Unless it's a PGA event and they're playing lift, clean, and place. If it's a PGA event, they're allowed to, a lot of times, lift, clean, and place.
Right.
For a game?
He's looking the other way. Place.
All right. And so mud could be something that, like you said here, can be declared by the committee to be abnormal ground condition. Ground under repair is what it would fall under.
How come that took so long for him to acknowledge that?
I was trying to forget it.
I know you were.
It's not quite water, but it's definitely a problem.
So a player may not ask to have another player's ball. A player may not ask to have another player's ball, which lies through the green, lifted in which of the following situations under Rule 22? Ball assisting or interfering with play. The ball is in a position to assist the play of a third player. The player's ball is not on his line of play, but is catching his eye. The ball is in a position to interfere with the play of a third player, and the ball is in position to interfere with his play. The player may not ask.
B catching the eye.
B is in boy.
B is in boy. All right,
May
let's think through this again.
Uh-oh.
You're wrong. So really,
Wording things.
the thing that
I
we,
like C.
yeah. All right,
I like
C. So we've got someone for C. I think C. It looks good to me too.
Uh-oh.
And why do you have C as your answer?
I guess the third player would have to ask himself. Worried about their ball, right?
He didn't like A, B, or D.
Basically, it's because anytime you're dealing with the ball, interfering with play, it has to be the only time that you can request something is when it's your ball. in play, not someone else's. So you're not the judge of someone else's play.
Interference
When,
wise.
when it comes to interference, assisting play is different. So you could say, if someone has a ball behind the putting green, you could say, please mark that because it's serving as a backstop for this player. But you can't say that, hey, move that ball out of the way because it might be interfering with player C's shot.
B applies for stuff like an immovable obstruction. Stance, swing, but just because it's interfering with your mental process, you don't get relief. But this rule is different. It's what, Rule 22? That one's different.
I'm reading it different.
There you can ask to have the ball.
Right. Yes, you're right. Exactly. So there is mental interference under Rule 22, but not.
But only 22.
Right. Exactly. But not under taking relief from an obstruction or something like that.
Last year I had to tell
So
them that they wouldn't
why
mark
do you
the ball
think
as a
C is the
foul.
right answer? Because somebody is asking somebody else to move the ball because it's going to interfere with the third player over here. You said that you can't do that.
The third player has to ask for it.
That's right. You can't not
Not
answer.
you.
Not answer.
Where is that?
No, Jeff, it's in Rule 22.
A player may not ask. So
You may not ask.
If he thinks the ball's assisting, he can ask that it can be moved because you're protecting the field.
A player.
But
may not ask
interfering,
to move the ball.
the only guy that can call interference is the guy whose ball is going to be involved in the stroke.
See, you can't say, Joe, mark your ball because it's interfering with Fred's play.
So why is C the right answer? Because that's what you're
Because it
doing.
says may not ask.
may not ask.
Well, you got to read
It's
this.
the key word.
What do you do? And that's.
I hate these not.
I know, the wording is so horrible.
You throw two or three
Really?
negatives in there,
Yeah.
and each time it reverses. I have a lot of trouble with that.
All right. Question 90. The committee is prohibited from doing which of the following? Allowing the competitors to set their own groups and tee times. B, moving a hole in stroke play regardless of the reason. C, eliminating a referee's duties in stroke play. And D, modifying the penalty for slow play to 1 stroke for the second offense in stroke play. So
Not A. Moving a hole. Like, what do they mean, moving a hole?
They can't let competitors set their own groups or tee times.
D,
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
Why do you think
it
D?
does say.
Well, assuming that it is a two-stroke penalty for slow play,
Yeah.
that's the rule. I don't think the committee has the
Ability to
ability or the authority to change the penalty stroke. That'd be my rationale. And the other ones, I think they could do.
Sure. Yep. D is the correct answer.
D is in David?
D is in David, and it says Rule 6-7 and then Rule 33. So I think what
And I was just getting ready to regurgitate the 33.
I think
Let's give them more time next time.
so basically, I think what it's saying here is that in 6-7, it says that it's a 2-stroke penalty, right, for slow play, for undue delay. Okay, so we got that.
4 minutes is not undue delay though, right?
Oh.
According to the tour.
Not according to the
4 minutes, yeah.
4.5.
4.5 was,
4 minutes, 10 seconds on it.
and not in the last group.
Yeah.
So
And it's getting dark.
so
It's starting to, that's not so close. So far.
So this is actually a tricky question here. And the reason that it's tricky is because
Rendering it indistinguishable from 74 others.
Yeah, really.
so if you look at 6-7 in note 2, it says for the purpose of preventing slow play, the committee may, in the conditions of the competition, establish place of play policy guidelines, including maximum periods of time allowed to complete a stipulated round, a hole or a stroke. In match play, the committee may, in such condition, modify the penalty for a breach of this rule, whatever. And then in stroke play, the committee may, in such a condition, modify the penalty for a breach of this rule as follows. So first offense can be 1 stroke. However, the second offense must be 2 strokes. And then for any subsequent offense must be disqualification. So that was why I think that question is really difficult, because when I read it initially, I thought, well, I know the committee has the ability to limit the penalty from 2 strokes to 1, but you have to really see that the second offense is what makes it. So for any second offense, it has to be 2 strokes. So if that said the first offense, then D would be true.
When
On
does
the other hand, it says the committee
when
must
would,
establish the times of starting
A come
and
into
end
effect?
stroke play, arrange groups in which competitors must play.
Yeah.
But-
So that's why A is not correct.
Why is that?
In a
A
competition?
is
Oh, it's
correct
prohibited from that way.
because the committee must
Oh, yeah,
set,
but
set
it's-
the groups.
But
and team
this
times.
says it's prohibited from allowing. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's that stupid wording.
two
I
negatives
know.
again.
I mean, I knew
Like
that it wasn't A, but yet then when I started reading it more, it was like,
Mike, what was your question?
Jim answered
You got
it.
it.
Yeah, it's more of a regular tournaments. You guys set the groups and
We
team
take-
times, but
Yeah, we take the
Smaller
entire
terms.
course, but sometimes that's not the case. You could be playing on a public course and the guy says, take your foursome, play whenever you want on the 22nd of May.
Right.
That's okay.
Well, they also say you can move your ball in the fairway too.
In that case, usually they're
Don't
saying,
post it.
they're giving you some guidelines. They might not say for specific times, but they're saying, hey, you need to play your match between May 1st and May 15th. That's still saying you're playing the match, and then you pick the date, but they're still giving a specific time.
They do that a lot.
Right.
So the answer is,
The answer is D, because for a second offense, it's actually a 2-stroke penalty.
right, okay.
Yeah.
Because a footnote to a subsection in the appendix
Yeah, I
says
saw
so.
that. Really? I saw the footnote.
Wow. All right. In match play, a player lifts his ball that is on the fringe without marking it and removes grass which is adhering to the ball. He replaces the ball properly. He incurs no penalty, a 1-stroke penalty, 2 1-stroke penalties, a loss of hole penalty.
You shouldn't be playing match play.
Yeah, really.
Match play.
oh, wait.
It's gotta be different.
He doesn't incur any penalty unless the other guy calls it on him.
I didn't get early.
That's true.
It is true, but that's not.
That is a question.
That's not one of the answers available.
Well, I mean, if you're the referee and you saw somebody
Well, no,
do that.
it doesn't say there's a referee either.
Right. I think that's always the answer to every match play question.
Unless there's a referee.
Yeah, exactly. Unless someone catches you or calls you.
Yeah.
But no. So let's say that this player, there was a referee in the match, or it was called on him. What would the penalty be?
I say 1.
Well, it was 2 strokes when the other guy picked up his ball.
But it's match play, isn't it?
And didn't,
That was substitution.
and
though.
substituted it. But that was for picking up the ball without marking it, right? So it should be 2 strokes for picking up the ball without marking it.
But
But it's match play.
but he replaces the ball, though.
It's either B or D.
He puts it back.
I think it's D.
I think it's A.
see,
All right, we got a lot.
Yeah.
Let's think about this. So as Craig was saying, if a player picks up their ball and they shouldn't have, but they put it back, is that a 1-stroke penalty or a 2-stroke penalty?
What about a player
It's the
that
loss of hole.
moves his ball and puts it back?
It's the loss of hole in match play, right?
This is well. So
There is no,
it's
there's no two-stroke penalty.
It's actually not, and this is a good example of why in match play not everything is a 2-stroke penalty. So this player is just touching their ball when they shouldn't, but they put it back. So as long as they put it back in the right place, which they did here, they're just going to get that 1-stroke penalty.
but they remove grass.
They remove grass.
That's
You can't
another
do that
penalty.
either.
They lifted and cleaned it, yeah.
clean the ball.
They cleaned the ball.
You lifted it without
Usually if
marking
you
it.
get a
and-
penalty on
I
something, you
don't
can
have
clean the
rule
ball.
saying why that's not the answer, but I have the answer sheet saying that the answer is B.
No, no,
You lifted it without marking it.
So, I
No,
don't,
no, Kyle, this goes back to that table in rule number 1, where one action violates 2 rules.
right.
Yeah.
And this is
One
one of
action.
those that, in essence, I think they did one thing, so it's 1 stroke. I mean, they did a bunch of little things within that one, but it only counts 1.
Why
Yeah.
isn't this?
Once you pick up the ball, that's a penalty, so you can clean it. Might just
Well,
well clean it.
it is
No
rule,
additional.
it is rule 18
Well,
that's the one where
Yeah,
where you go to.
ball in play moves.
It has to be because it's stroke play.
So the penalty is the loss of ball for.
Only if you don't put it
breaching
back.
Rule 18. What?
Only if you don't put it back. Read what it says. Only if you're not putting it back.
Only if I'm what?
Did not replace it,
He didn't mark it.
But he still replaced
but
it.
he still replaced
If a
it.
player is required to replace the ball,
Says he
fails to
properly
do so,
replaced it.
or if he makes a stroke at a ball, substitute under Rule 18. Such substitute is not permitted, he incurs a general penalty for breach of 18, but there is no additional penalty for this rule. But the
It's the same
penalty,
ball.
match
Yeah,
play is lost and whole.
That's what I thought.
Only if he doesn't replace it though.
That's not, I don't see where it
Where you would you
defines that.
where you're reading
Page 269.
284.
Look, 268, about halfway down under II.
Yeah.
Says if the ball is moved, it must be replaced.
Yeah.
And then it says the player incurs a penalty of 1 stroke.
Where does it say that?
But it
18
does-
18-2 II.
Tom, it does say on there though, he replaces the ball properly. So it does say he puts the ball back.
you're reading where it says if a player there's an asterisk there, if a player who is required to replace the ball fails to do so. That's when you get the general penalty.
Kyle,
Well, that's
Right?
why I
Aren't you reading
said-
right here?
I'm giving
No,
them
no,
loss
look,
of.
Kyle,
Oh, I
look
don't
at
care
1-4
How does he know that's a-
slash 12.
If he's stupid enough to
Related
pick up his
acts
ball.
result in 1.
I know.
He loses the whole.
What page? Yeah, or
31.
1 dash.
I'll bet that's where they're getting it.
What page you
What
on?
page?
31,
What act?
Plus he puts it down here.
at the very bottom.
It's just all stroke play. One act results in 1 goal breach. An act results in 2 breach. That's all stroke play.
It's all stroke play.
I don't get that.
So I
don't
think
know.
it's
Where does it say stroke
it's
play?
two-
On which one? Every one of them.
One,
Kyle, what's the rule reference in the answer?
one dash
It
slash
says
12,
18-2.
page 31.
18-2,
Number 1, stroke
13.
play.
Yeah, well, Kyle, Rule 21 says, it says the ball can be cleaned when it's lifted, except for 3 circumstances. And one of those 3 circumstances is not he lifted it when he wasn't allowed to lift it.
Okay. Yeah, so basically what you're saying is that he is allowed to clean it when he does that, correct?
When he lifts it without marking it?
It says, does the player incur an additional penalty stroke under Rule 21 for cleaning the ball? No. Rule 21 states that the ball may be cleaned when lifted, except when it has been lifted in accordance with Rule 5.3, 12.2, or 22. So once you've made the error of lifting it by mistake, you are allowed to clean it.
There's no additional penalty for cleaning it.
There's no additional penalty.
You get the penalty for lifting the ball,
Right.
but not for the cleaning it, so.
Get
Once you
loss
got it in your
of
hand
whole.
and you done
Get
something
them-
wrong.
Give them the reading rules,
Thanks.
loss of whole, we'll
Thanks,
decide
John,
when to
for
apply
on
it.
that one. And
Later.
and
Are you calling? He accepts it. Whole loss.
What did we decide? It's gonna be fine.
But you don't want to play
The
with
answer
a
is a 1-stroke penalty, and it's because that decision, what was it, Dan, again?
18-2/13.
So it's
As
one stroke.
As John was saying, that this is not one of the situations where the player is penalized for cleaning their ball, so that cleaning is not, you're not gonna get penalized for that.
Oh, my goodness.
All right, 88, in stroke play, a competitor taking relief from a lateral water hazard drops his ball 3 club lengths to the side of where it last entered the hazard, but not nearer the hole than where the ball last entered the hazard. He plays the ball from there. How many total penalty strokes does the player incur?
2.
1, 2, 3, 3 strokes, and he must correct the error by playing from the correct place.
B.
But it's got to, I
General
think it must
penalty.
be D. He's got to replace the ball. You got to replay it from the right place, doesn't he?
No, because it's not a serious breach, right? 'Cause he's just taking one more club length.
It's probably 2 strokes. because it's
That was one of
2
Mick's
plus 1 equals
questions
2.
last week. Yeah.
Okay, so this one is another tricky question, and the way that I kind of go about this, the answer is actually 3, because you have to look at the player is also getting a 1-stroke penalty from taking relief from the lateral water hazard.
Oh, I forgot.
Right, so they're getting that one penalty plus 2 from playing from the wrong place.
Okay.
So this one is something that you'll commonly see on a rules test, but it's also something that you're going to communicate to a player as well too, right? Because the player's going to ask, how many stroke penalty? Well, you're not going to tell them 3. You're going to say you're going to get 2 for playing from the wrong place, and don't forget the 1 from the hazard.
So the answer here is C.
Correct.
No, okay.
Correct.
He worded it.
And so
Because you don't have to correct.
I'm going to try to draw on this just real quick.
Are you ready to roll this year?
But I think so on questions like these, and there's probably better examples, but I like to use a T-bar, and even when I'm on the golf course, I like to use this T-bar. So I just do. Sorry for this poor handwriting, but it's, so I got strokes and penalties. So when I'm counting up things like this, I always try. I keep tally marks. So I know in here this player, okay, they hit the ball in the hazard, so that's 1 stroke. They're going to take 1 stroke to get it out. They played their next shot, that's another stroke, and they played from the wrong place, so they're going to get 2 penalties for that. And then however many putts they hit or whatever from there, and that's how I count the strokes. And so sometimes it gets difficult when you're counting through, but this is a good way to kind of keep track of everything and make sure you're not forgetting penalties or whatever.
And you got 2 more for slow play.
Because you ran out of fingerprint going through the action sheet.
All right, 87 here. Which of the following is not correct when the player is putting the ball into play at the point where the previous stroke was made? So that's 20-5. So when returning to the teeing ground, the player may tee the ball anywhere within the teeing ground. That's true. B, when returning to a location that is in a water hazard, the player must drop the ball outside the water hazard under Rule 26.
No.
Okay,
So
there's
that's
some
the
hesitation there.
No.
C, when returning to a location that is through the green, the player must drop the ball as near as possible, but not near the hole in the location where the ball was last played.
Yeah.
That's right. And when returning to the teeing ground, the player may simply toss a ball onto the teeing ground rather than dropping, placing, or teeing the ball.
Yeah. True.
They can do that too. So our answer is B.
Okay.
86. Which of the following is not an option for a ball in a water hazard, which last crossed the yellow margin of the hazard? So this is fairly straightforward. Play the ball as it lies.
Yeah.
Okay. Play a ball from where a previous stroke was made with a 1-stroke penalty.
Yeah.
Good. Play a ball which was dropped outside the hazard on the extension of the line from the hole to where the ball lies in the hazard, going back as far as the player wants.
Yeah.
Forget D, it'll just confuse you.
Yeah. So we got 3 A's.
And so we know A, B, and C are right, so our answer is D. And the reason that the answer is D is because playing the drop outside the hazard. Last cross. So this is basically saying that we're talking about it's not where you cross, it's where that flag and where you cross on that line, not where you cross and going back this way. Make sense?
Kyle?
Yeah.
Was that an answer, Kyle?
It was.
Wouldn't it be C?
It is C.
Oh, I thought you said D. Okay.
Wait a minute.
No, it's
No,
D.
it says it's D. It's not C. It's D.
Yeah. No, wait.
No.
Hold on. I
C
think
is
you're right. I need to read this right again.
Please read C carefully.
Yeah, I'm gonna read
C.
C.
Where it last crossed the line to the hazard.
So play a ball which was dropped outside the hazard on the extension of the line from the hole through where the ball lies in the hazard,
Where
north
the ball
back
lies,
as far as the player wants.
It doesn't lie there. You
Lies
got
in the
to
hazard.
we're across the hazard.
Exactly.
be right
Yep.
across
So
the
so the answer is C. So good catch there. Sorry about that.
What's that?
The answer is C. So let's read it carefully here.
Yeah.
So play a ball which was dropped outside the hazard on the extension of the line from the hole to where the ball lies in the hazard.
No.
That's not where it lies.
No,
It's where
it's
it's
where
where the ball
yeah.
it's where the ball last crossed,
Which is D.
which is D. So thank you for pointing that out. So this
Oh, okay.
goes back. I mean, reading is
I thought you were staying with C.
is challenging, and we have to make sure that we are reading correctly. But yeah, so if we're since the ball's in a hazard, we're not going from where the ball is. We're going from where we last crossed the margin of the water hazard.
So this
So to
year,
clarify,
Not
C
the
is the
rule, shitty question.
correct answer.
That was a good shitty
And
question.
every year it's a combination.
Charlie, yeah. So C is the correct answer to 86.
All right, thanks.
Good catch there.
Every year there's a shitty.
You too, Sophia.
did you say C again as the
I
correct
said-
answer? It's not.
Yes, it
C is the
That's
correct
not the
answer.
option, because that's the
You can't
reverse.
go from where the ball lies in the hazard. You got to go
Exactly.
from where last where across the
Exactly.
margin of the hazard.
That's right.
So that's,
That's what they're
so
saying.
Steve
Which one
says
is
that about
It
the margin
says
of the
which one's
hazard.
not. It says
Which
which one
one
is
is
not.
Uh-huh. It's the negatives again.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. That's the,
Still.
that is.
Yeah, we have two easy ones on our own, and we get another.
Anger, don't we?
Yeah, 2 and 1.
Okay. So 85. In which of the following is the player penalized for improperly substituting the ball? Playing an abandoned ball which was under leaves through the green after the player had moved the leaves but not the ball, and incorrectly identified it as his. Playing a ball which was dropped and played for a ball which was in a water hazard when the ball in the water could easily be retrieved. C, without informing his fellow competitor, he plays a ball which was substituted for a ball lifted on the putting green after the player noticed that the original ball had a cut on the cover. D, playing a ball which was dropped and played for a ball which was in casual water when the ball in the water could easily be retrieved. So, again, to read the question, which of the following is the player penalized for improperly substituting the ball? So let's just go through these each one by one. So A, playing an abandoned ball which was under leaves through the green. Is this a substituted ball or is it?
That's a wrong ball.
It's a wrong ball. Okay, so it's not A. B, playing a ball which was dropped and played for a ball which was in a water hazard when the ball could be easily retrieved.
Doesn't matter.
Well, you don't have to. You can substitute freely when your ball goes into a water hazard. C, without informing his fellow competitor, he plays a ball which was substituted for a ball lifted on the putting green after the player noticed that the original ball had a cut on the cover. Is this player penalized for improperly substituting the ball?
Sure.
Yes.
You sure?
Well,
Yeah.
Because D looks good too.
I think okay. So we have to look at this because this player is breaking the procedure. But is this player allowed to substitute a ball if his ball has a cut on the cover and it's unfit for play? So this player is not getting a penalty for substituting the ball because that substitution is allowed. He's getting a penalty because he lifted it and didn't tell his fellow.
Right.
Exactly. So our answer is B, playing a ball which was dropped and played for a ball which was in casual water when the ball in the water could easily be retrieved. So, right. So if you go to Rule 25, casual water. All right, so let's see here. Where are we at?
Note 2, ball to be dropped or placed under the rules, not immediately recovered. Not immediately recovered.
Right.
So
So
that,
here we go. So Tom, as you said there, in note 2, under 24-2B, it says if a ball to be dropped or placed under this rule is not immediately recoverable, another ball may be substituted. So this situation is talking about where the ball is easily retrieved and and the player has to go get that ball. An example where they wouldn't have to go get it is, let's say that the casual water is a foot deep or two foot deep, and it's in the middle of a bunker, and they don't want to walk through the water. That would be a situation where it's not immediately recoverable. But if it's just sitting on the edge, they need to grab that ball and substitute with that ball. Everyone good there? Okay. So 84, in stroke play, a competitor takes relief from a water hazard. He stands on the extension of the line from the hole through the point the ball last crossed the margin of the water hazard. Holds his arm to the side and drops the ball 1 arm length to the side of his line. In addition to the 1-stroke penalty under Rule 21-6, water hazards, the ruling is he has proceeded correctly. He incurs no penalty as long as he corrects the incorrect drop before making a stroke. Otherwise, otherwise he incurs a 2-stroke penalty. He incurs a 2-stroke penalty and must play the ball as it lies. He incurs a 2-stroke penalty and must correct the incorrect drop. So again, he stands on the extension of the line from the hole, okay, and then he holds his arm to the side and drops the ball 1 arm length to the side of this line. Okay, so we go back to, we look at, so this player is taking relief from the water hazard.
So he's standing on the line?
He's standing on the line.
And drops it, and I was
He drop it on the line.
But you had a whole half circle from that.
He didn't say he doesn't shoulder height, it's just that it extends.
You don't have a half circle
He
there.
stands on, and he holds the arm to his side and drops the ball.
Oh, okay.
Oh, he doesn't.
Well, then,
Doesn't drop it from shoulder height.
Holds his arm to the side and drops the ball
New rule.
1 arm length.
okay, it doesn't say that he goes
He's
straight down.
not dropping it on the line, he's dropping it off the line.
Dropping improper. 26-1B.
Yeah.
Right.
So you got
So
the
you have
eraser
to
rule.
drop on the extension of the line.
What's the answer?
Not
26-1B.
We're talking about.
20
We got
20-6 is
Right.
the
But
eraser
you're
rule.
correct.
If you don't hit a stroke.
So
you drop it
because
second place.
26-1B, the player is dropping the ball not in a correct place.
He's in the point at which the ball originally crossed the margin. The hazard directly between the hole and the spot on which the ball is to be dropped.
So he should have held it out in front of himself.
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, it should be on that line.
Yep.
Right? And so since it's not on the line, it's in the wrong place. But under the eraser rule,
He can pick it up because he hasn't got a stroke yet.
so as long as he hasn't hit it, because he hasn't hit the ball yet, he's
There's no
not.
penalty
He's
as
not
long as he corrects the incorrect drop before making a stroke.
exactly. So B is our answer here. So as long as he fixes it before he hits the next
There was
stroke,
no knots in there,
there's
though.
only the 1-stroke penalty for playing from a lateral water hazard. If he were to hit it, then we have what?
2-stroke, wrong place, 2-stroke penalty.
2-stroke plus the lateral or plus the water hazard 1. So all right, let's do last question here. A player lifts his ball from the cart path without marking its position when taking relief under Rule 24 obstruction. He incurs A, no penalty, B, a 1-stroke penalty, C, a 1-stroke penalty, but if fails to replace it and mark before lifting it again, becomes a general penalty, or D, he incurs a general penalty.
That's A, because he said he's gonna take relief.
All right, so he's taking relief. There's no rule that's saying that you need to mark it. It's obviously recommended.
Absolutely, I always tell him to do it.
Let the player mark it, but really in that case, I would even go forward and tell the player, let's just leave the ball there. Don't even mark it. Leave the ball there. Let's figure out where your nearest point of life is going to be, because it might be in a bush and they may end up wanting to play it from that cart path. So once they pick it up, even if they mark it, there's still going to be a penalty if they have to put it back. If they decide that they don't want to take relief.
Right.
So in that case, it's probably best just to tell them, leave it on the cart path. Let's figure out where you're going to go first, and then you can pick it up.
Can you substitute a ball?
In that case, I believe
Yes.
yes.
On a cart path?
I don't think so. No,
If
if it's not
Can
immediately
you substitute a
recoverable.
ball?
No, unless it's not immediately recoverable, you cannot substitute a ball.
So before he takes his drop, he has to use that ball.
He has to use that ball. Now, if it like bounced off the cart path and went to the hazard and you couldn't grab it, he could use it.
Or if it got damaged.
Or if it was damaged.
Sure, yeah,
If it was damaged, any hand point is out.
Yeah.
right.
I'm sorry, so the answer to this question is what?
The
A?
answer is A.
Okay.
Yeah.
The answer is A, right? I don't like these back questions.
I know, that's,
I don't want to take
I
this
programmed
test.
All right,
computers
thank you.
for 20 years. I
Thank
would
you
do
guys
everything I could to stay away from that.
We'll get back on
Because
schedule
it's so
next week, but both good experience.
Not only for being invited, for the person
What are we
that
gonna do
do
next
maintenance on it.
We'll probably get started back on Rule 20. I think because that's so common.
Rule 20 is good.
Yeah.
So you all done with your busy work, so you can get back
Busy
to work
work.
with us?
That's all we need.
Well, you said something in your email that you something special.